Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. We're just going to give people time to ping into the background as people are coming through. As you can probably hear, team's going crazy in the background. And we'll just give people a little bit more time to come in before we start. I did not mean to do that. I will flick backwards. There we go. Give people a couple more minutes just to come through. Hope you're all doing well, not boiling too much in the heat. Okay, right. I shall kick things off, I think, and we'll let everybody else come in as we see them crop up. So good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are based. Welcome to the ClearBox Hotseat. This is episode number 4, where I'm joined by Chris Tubb and Steve Bynghall, and we will come back to you, fellows, in a moment. First of all, just a little bit about myself. So I'm Susie Robinson. I've worked in this industry for about 18 years now. I worked as an internal communications and intranet manager for a number of different organisations. I've worked with a lot of frontline workers as part of that, so it's always been a big passion of mine. I won an award for one of the intranets that I worked on, and I've had quite a lot of experience of getting intranets sorted out along the way. And since 2019, I've been a consultant at ClearBox Consulting, and I help our clients with their projects, and I also manage the ClearBox review reports as well. So a little bit about ClearBox Consulting. We're a small specialist digital workplace and internet consultancy. We are nearly going to be 20 years old. In fact, it'll be at the beginning of next year that we turn 20, which is very exciting. And we help organisations make their intranets and digital workplaces better through being clear about what they need to do to support the business and how to do that the most effective way through people, processes and technology as well. We are technology agnostic and vendor neutral. We don't have any referral agreements or commission arrangements with any vendors in place. And all of our consultants have first-hand experience of running intranets like me. As a quick reminder, as I say, I'm joined by Steve and Chris today, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. And as a reminder, this is a hot seat session. So we have prepared a few questions, but what we really want is some questions from you all. So please do open the Q&A panel just in the top there and type in the questions as they come to you. If you don't have a question of your own, please do still keep an eye on them so you can upvote your favourites so that I can pose them to Steve and to Chris. We'll also keep an eye on any technical questions, so I'll keep an eye on that in the background, and I will try and answer those for you if you're having any problems. And also, before the inevitable question is asked, yes, we are recording this session and we will make it available to you afterwards. We will send you a link via email probably at the beginning of next week sometime, so you will be able to watch this back and relive all of the questions and answers. So then, joining me today are Chris and Steve. So welcome again to you both. Thank you very much for joining me and joining everybody else. Let's get a little bit of an introduction from you before we kick off into some of our questions. So Chris, would you like to start by kicking off and introducing yourself?
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Tubb. I'm partner at Spark Trajectory. We help organisations make sure that they've got everything that they need right for their internet and digital workplace, particularly in this new world of AI. I've been doing intranets nearly for 30 years. I started in 1996, so that makes me very old. And I've been consulting using intranets and digital workplaces since about 2010.
Great stuff, thank you. And Steve?
Hi Susie, yep, thanks very much for kind of inviting us on. So I'm the other half of Spark Trajectory. Like Chris, I've spent about the same time since 1996 kind of in and out of the industry, or mainly in the industry. I come from a sort of knowledge management background, but sort of gravitated towards digital workplaces and intranets and collaboration. We founded Spark Trajectory in late 2017, and we outside Spark Trajectory, I do a couple of other things. So I'm actually involved in the ClearBox report. So I do some editing and now a little bit of reviewing as well. And also I work with Step 2, run by James Robertson, and I actually manage the Global Intranet and Digital Workplace Awards each year. And yeah, pleasure to be here and talk about AI and content governance and things like that.
Great stuff. Thank you. So, yes, that is the subject for today. And over the last year or so, I think it's probably fair to say that you've shared quite a lot of materials about AI and the way that it works within digital workplaces and the kind of the context of organizations. So let's kick things off by just giving a little bit of a foundational answer. So, Chris, could you tell us what your position is on AI in that context of the digital workplace?
Sure, and important to point out, not AI haters, AI realists. I would like to say we use AI all the time. We're a two-person organization, and we use kind of Claude to help us run the company. It helps us, deliver consulting engagements. We're using it kind of constantly. I would say, though, I think it was about a year ago, I think we felt that we were very frustrated about how it was being referred to as this transformational technology without limits. And I think things have become a lot more realistic over the past year. About this time last year, we started researching it really properly as a topic. We published a series of posts called the AI Heresies, to try and really get a handle on what did it mean for us as an industry, either in terms of intranets as a resource for finding information or for communications or for knowledge management or collaboration and all of that kind of stuff that was in between. And it didn't really feel to us that there was much of a unified answer there apart from what people were selling. And I think our sort of takeaway from that was the kind of the key issue is how do you manage information in a way that a user can basically put any question into a box and expect an answer. And no matter that sort of the magicness of that magic box, the answer was always really going to be badly in terms of the limitations that we know, particularly around content, around how people manage content, and really about the limitations of effectively the physics of information, and also the economics of organizations about how they're going to be able to maintain things. I think at the moment we want to get answers out of the digital workplace, and they need to be accurate, and they're not. The next step for that is seemingly we want to be able to use these tools to action things for us within the digital workplace. And I think that is something which is at the moment seems quite far off about how much you would trust it. And then ultimately it seems that the direction that organizations want is that of sort of autonomy. We want the promise is that we should be able to set agents off, and it can book our travel, and it can do our expenses, and it can do all of these things that we don't necessarily want to do. And it can do some of that, but I think what we found over, in particular the last year, because things haven't seemingly changed that much, unless you are a programmer and you're using Claude Code which has completely changed that industry. If you're just a normal person within a normal organization, it saved you maybe a couple of hours or a bit of time a week. It hasn't necessarily opened up, we don't need this entire department. We don't, we don't need humans anymore. And I think that is, there's something really inherent and important there about what organizations are and what people mean. And, if you could specify a role to the extent that it could be automated, a machine would already be doing it. It would be something that's already automated. If you could communicate it really simply, maybe you'd give that task to a freelancer or you'd outsource it. But actually, it turns out that most people who are working within organizations are there to absorb the ambiguity that you find within organizations, that organizations are intentionally a messy place. And that's humans' role within these organizations, is to deal with this ambiguity, deal with this mess. And if you've ever tried to automate a process, you'll know that it ends up, the human is involved to manage exceptions. And without any human oversight, these things become really, really, really brittle. So I think where we are with that is that we are learning as an industry over the past couple of years the limitations of this technology, which is going to be transformational. It's going to be very, very different. The future will be different, but it might not necessarily be the different that we expected. And a lot of that is down to really this kind of organizational ambiguity and complexity. We're really interested in, I guess I'll explain what I mean, the organizational domain. So you've got the personal domain, which is pretty much your email, the where you put your own personal notes, where maybe you've got your sort of instant messages going. There'll be kind of tools for group domain tasks, which is the typical stuff that you do with Teams or SharePoint, and maybe you've got a bit of Viva Engage in there. The stuff that groups need to do to collaborate and work together. And both of those areas really well, and they tend to be quite messy. And when you apply either search or AI within those areas, you get maybe answers back that you go, that's not quite right. I think it's got the wrong end of the stick. And actually, you are able to spot those errors, and you're able to go, well, that's not really what you've got the wrong end of the stick. I'll go around again.
Yeah.
The other domain is organizational, and that's really where intranets these days very, very squarely lie. It is the organizations and departments and processes sort of face to the employees. And the sort of information that you put in there needs to be so much more accurate, because if somebody should ask a question of an agent, it needs to be the specific and correct answer, because you're not an expert in HR. You're not an expert in the travel policy. You're not an expert in all of these dozens of other tasks that are going on there. You can't spot the error. You need to be able to take that answer and trust it on face value. And obviously, you're going to end up with lots of different bits of content, lots of mess, perhaps conflicting information, perhaps rival pieces of information because they're coming from different parts of the organization. And what any AI system will do is called silent blending. It will bring this together, hazard a guess at the answer because it's just a little probability machine, and it will go, okay, I think this is the answer based on the information that it's grounded on, so-called, retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And you're saying, in this information, what do you think the answer is? So as we know as intranet practitioners, keeping that corpus of information as clean and as accurate and as easy to understand as possible is not a trivial task.
Yeah.
It is in fact the main problem with our industry, is that you're asking people throughout an organization to create and maintain information. And obviously that is usually done imperfectly. And, it is part of our role as consultants to go, here are some tactics, here's some strategies to try and put it the right way. Whereas the where we have maybe come in with AI thinking, oh, great, now we don't need to, we can just get the machines to do it for us. Where actually the governance of that content needs to be even more perfect than it was before. And my great worry is that most vendors they've started with the assumption that the information is kind of accurate. But the sorts of inaccuracy that we can expect is a term that we call equivocality, is that it's not just that the information doesn't exist. It's the fact that you might have different sources of information or rival sources of information. You might have a divergence between different geographies. You might have a divergence between different business units. You might have multiple languages. You might have things that are supposed to be authoritative, like policies, which end up not authoritative because there's lots of different versions of them. Or maybe somebody has created like a departmental cheat sheet, which is really popular. And that becomes, from the AI's point of view, the most important and useful source. So we've got all of these different problems that we think that we can now wave a magic wand at, but we've also got to make it useful for both humans and the ingestion of this information by AIs. And I think this is really one of the sort of major problems that we have, is really trying to sort of make it clear to organizations that published information is more important now than it has ever been, if you want this to be the source of these synthetic answers.
So if we take what you said around the messiness, the ambivalence, maybe ambiguity, around the content that's there, that assumption from vendors. Steve, I'd like to come to you and think about governance then. So what are your thoughts about content governance, the impact of that on AI, maybe AI's impact on content governance? Is there any insights you can share, or any kind of further thoughts to enhance or expand on what Chris has already said? And you're on mute, by the way. Classic. Good.
Classic. You knew it was always gonna be me doing that first, wasn't it? I think I suspect most of the people on this call are our digital workplace and internet professionals, and we all know that content governance is it's a significant issue. We encounter a lot in our client work. If someone says, oh, the search isn't working, it's often a content governance problem, because no one's ever deleted any content, or the content is out of date or inaccurate. It's content governance is also a massive issue beyond the intranet, with kind of proliferation of SharePoint sites that are kind of out of control, etc. So most organizations, I would say, are not coming from a position of strength when they're looking at kind of content governance. So they, as Chris pointed out, with some of the things, they've got multiple versions. There's old ancient content that has kind of no purpose, things that are poorly formatted, both for humans and for the AI, etc. And that's a significant potential barrier to introducing kind of AI. It's this age-old problem that we've seen manifesting itself in various different ways of garbage in, garbage out. I think what you tend to find is there'll be some areas where there is a more focused, and there's been more attention given to kind of content governance. So, for example, I don't know, around a particular area of content that's high risk or something like that, or for a particular kind of service, or maybe there's some content owners who've sort of got their kind of act together. But when you look at across the whole piece, it's a kind of real issue. So yeah, it's also compounded by the fact that when you run AI over this information that's either out of date, contradictory, has gaps in it, etc., that it presents the information very, very, very confidently. And I think I don't know about you, whether you find this, but even when you're working with Claude or with Copilot, etc., even if you know this, and you have to be very careful, it's very, very easy to be kind of complacent about that sort of those answers which are either wrong or or basically providing you kind of like misinformation. So it's very, very difficult for kind of people to control. And for example, I suppose you take like policies, for example. So we're currently working with a client where the policy management has been a little bit poor over the years, and basically there's kind of multiple versions. And actually when a policy should be a very good use case for running AI over something to give kind of authoritative answers. But if you haven't got the kind of policies correct, it's going to lead to kind of a number of different problems. There's also an extra thing in there, interestingly. Policies tend to be very long documents, and there's this sort of issue called the lost in the middle problem, where some AI tends to add more relevance to things which are at the beginning and at the end of a long document, and things kind of get missed. So it's creating, I think, it's creating significant risk. So I think it plays out in kind of two ways. One is some people are probably simply not ready to get the best that they can out of AI, particularly in running it over content where they're going to be providing answers to the kind of questions that employees want to kind of ask. And the second thing is people are going to just go ahead and are already running kind of agents or bots over content, and probably not realizing where the kind of risk is.
Yeah.
I was going to say also, I think one of the issues around it is probably because no one really owns content governance overall. Most content governance is actually distributed amongst kind of different owners, or it's kind of channel based. So maybe an intranet team want to own content governance, but it's limited to the channel they can control, and IT very much into governance of AI in terms of kind of security and access, etc. But they're not really kind of covering the content. So it's a sort of area that kind of tends to fall in between the cracks. And I think that's also one of the kind of issues. And I think that's, as intranet and digital workplace professionals, that's one of the areas that we need to do, is kind of try and get some ownership back for kind of content governance.
You've mentioned, obviously, they're talking about content governance specifically, but you've also talked about the format of content a couple of times. So the length being one, so giving priorities to information that's at the start, potentially in some content and some AI tools, but also the format of the information itself. So some AIs prefer a Q&A format for really searching through and presenting the right answers. But then actual real human people don't really like that format, despite it being quite a common one. What do you think, Steve? I'll come to you with this first. What do you think, or do you have any tips for people who are here now and thinking, how do I best optimize my content so that it will work with Copilot or whatever other AI agent or AI tool we have in place? Are there any, like, a few tips you can give people?
Oh gosh,
Put you on the
definitely
spot.
put me on the spot. Well, I suppose AI is a little bit of a black box, isn't it? In terms of, it's hard to know how to specifically optimize it for everything that you kind of want to do. But a lot of it is about kind of applying applying kind of structure and applying metadata and doing the kind of the right labels in this sort of background, and I think that tends to also lend itself well to stuff that kind of tends to be more kind of readable, at least in terms of making sure a content meets a specific kind of need. So, particularly when you're kind of doing sort of reference information, etc. So there's definitely been some things about, well, do you need to write the content for AI and write the content for humans, and are they kind of two separate things? I'm not sure they're mutually exclusive.
It's just worth bearing in mind, isn't it? When you are coming to create content, you need to be thinking about this other audience that you've maybe never thought about before, that goes beyond your employees. It's now this AI tool. Chris, I'll come back to you then. So AI has been changing the way that many of us complete tasks digitally now. What would you say organisations should be considering when it comes to the user experience of those digital tools?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess users get this experience of decisions that they didn't know were taken on their behalf, and they're looking at all of these different tools. I think most of it is around. Obviously, we're seeing a move away from sort of passive use of effectively web content towards that sort of question and answer format in a chat format, and that the content needs to be probably made sure that it's available in that fashion or in some way, and that cascades quite clearly out of the sort of behaviors that we see within the practices that we see from SEO and from accessibility anyway, is to provide a variety of sort of content. I think what we're also need to sort of take into account is that if you are to consume information and you're looking for it actively in a sort of orthodox click sort of way, that you build up various trust signals as part of your search. And we've described that as climbing Mount Findable. And that you go through the sort of the foothills through various systems and tools and services, and up there is a mountain, and on the top of it is your answer. And that as you make your way through the world, that you're equipping yourself to make a decision about whether this policy, this answer feels right to you. And that when we are doing that with agents, is that you're effectively, it's like you're just seeing the peaks of the mountains. They're poking their way through the clouds, and you're kind of absenting yourself from understanding those sort of trust signals. And I think we've got to try and look at the entire digital workplace as what would that path between task and fruition look like. And at the moment, we have a series of path systems. Intranet is one, things like Teams and email are another, enterprise search is another, that we are adding in a series of sort of chat interfaces, which might be there, might be provided by different groups, might be grounded on different sorts of information. And the digital workplace will become a way of finding the right agent for the job, which is exactly the same as finding a particular answer. It is just the same issue, just sort of writ larger when there's hundreds and hundreds of agents. How do I know that this is the right one? We're also seeing this, we like to think about it as you're finding a product, or do you need to kind of self-serve and self-resolve a problem with that product? So I'm going to complete my expenses in SAP Concur, but I might have information which is much more around, can I claim this particular line item? Can I claim a breakfast because my train was before 7 a.m.? And those are in different places within the digital workplace. And to what extent are we able to understand and model those tasks and predict what those issues would be, either in the delivery of the task or into the support thing, support content, support person, ticket, whatever. And we've got this division between what we call anchored and unanchored tasks. And an anchored task is, if you like, knowable in advance. So, I need to claim my expenses, or the fact that there is an expenses system is known. The fact that there is an expense claim that you can make it is known. But what are the roles and responsibilities of Susie Robinson? Well, is that actually written down anywhere in a way which is accessible to an LLM? And the idea, but actually, it's probably not. Anything there would be inference. The one I always use, who's responsible for data governance in Greece? Well, maybe the person who's responsible for data governance in Greece for this project isn't aware of that until he's in the meeting, and it's going to come down to him. So we have a series of things that we can kind of predict in terms of anchored tasks that we ought to be able to say, these have good answers and we should be able to model them. And then we have a series of unanchored tasks, which we should say, these are too dangerous to generate. It's likely that the AI will hallucinate. It's going to be risky, whatever we do. So maybe we should use more orthodox ways of routing people to the answer. And I think this is, and we often get this. It's like, why do you need intranets? Can't we just publish things in SharePoint? Or, we don't need those anymore. Why do you need to go around? And there is a very specific reason of why we have things, content in some systems is posted and content in other systems is published, because publication is a process of sort of consent and sanitization, and it takes accountability for what will happen in the future. So where we're seeing, good stuff happening is generally we've got a nice clean boundary between what is unpublished or posted or available to you or informal content, and things which are definably and organizationally true and verifiable, which is going to be on this published site. And hopefully that publication process has not only means it's going to be more up to date, it means that it's also going to be done with a process which means that it will have changed its point of view or perspective. It won't be sort of project information. It'll now be outwardly facing information usable for employees and colleagues. But also, you will then come back to it to make sure that it is okay. And the problem with, I would say, AI governance as it is reconstructed today, and Steve alluded to this, is that AI governance is very much more around, are you as an organization street legal? Has this agent got access to this correct piece of information? Is this within line with in GDPR or the EU or UK or US legislation? And none of those are around the success of the overall answer or the risk of the overall answer. It's just kind of like, it's the agent's owned, but actually it's more than that. It's has it given me something There are worse things than not finding the answer, being told something completely opposite, or being told something really dangerous. And those sort of epistemic risks are going to be really, really dangerous in the future. And what we're looking at is so we have a user journey mapping process, which is very useful. It's very lovely. We love doing it. We come up with user journeys. We define user stories. We understand how they are completed within the digital workplace, and as they hop between, say, intranet to search to product to policy, and then maybe you have to go and speak to someone. So you're seeing these chains of movement through the digital workplace. Can we use that to sample the user experience of the digital workplace? How successful are you once you start using these more novel tools to get answers and to do actions, or to deliver you to the right place in the digital workplace? But also, what is the risk that is involved in doing so? So if we are to take a user story, such as, I need to book travel, to what extent is that risky based on the equivocality of the information, the geographical and business unit divergence of the source information, the multiplicity of, say, travel booking, which does tend to be provided on a domestic basis, and how authoritative is the content? Is it based on solid policy, which is very clear and clean, or is it scattered about? Well, the employee may do that under certain circumstances. Well, the AI is not going to be able to work out what that is. So there is a lot there which I think we can understand what user experience means across the digital workplace, which is not around a singular interface. It is about understanding how you can go through perhaps dozens of interfaces across loads of different product owners and content owners that you might need to deliver a user journey, and that you can then do that, get a good understanding about whether that's something that AI can help with, or actually you become the chief misinformation officer and you're just giving people completely made up answers with your AI product.
Yeah. So you've shared between you quite a few kind of risks and concerns. We've had a question come in from someone saying that we have shared some of those kind of more pessimistic side of using AI in the intranet, like garbage in, garbage out, for example. So Steve, I'll come to you in a moment. The question is, are there any good and inspiring examples of AI and the intranet? So one example that I will share actually is from I believe it was a UK-based hardware store company, I think it was B&Q, who had identified a local lady who was the fountain of knowledge in the local area. Their store would get phone calls all of the time. She would get questions all of the time, and she would also kind of create her own little videos and things and share it on Beaver Engage. And they, as an organisation, asked her to come and essentially populate a database of information behind the scenes, which then an AI agent would then be pointed at to help answer some of those questions. And it meant that she was then freed up to go and be able to do her own thing, but also still create the really nice content. So showing how to put together some particular piece of equipment that had come through, for example, and showing those really practical live things rather than just being asked all of those questions in a kind of more repetitive sort of way. And I thought that's a really nice example of where it can work. But Steve, let's come to you. Have you, in your travels of working with your clients, have you seen any really good examples? Oh, you're on mute again.
How noisy is it in your street that you have to be on mute?
Honestly, you don't want to answer. You don't want to know. Yeah. So in terms of intranets, just thinking about, so one of the, as I said at the start of the session, I'm involved in the Step 2's Intranet and Digital Workplace Awards, and we see quite a few things where quite a few organisations where they're using kind of AI. I mean, interestingly, we're quite surprised by the the lack of entries we do get that do kind of successfully use AI, but we've had some entries which are doing kind of some quite interesting things. We're actually just about to reveal the winners next month for this year, and there's a really interesting use case which unfortunately I can't talk about. But for last year there was a very good example from EY of they had a sort of intranet, or it's more of a kind of knowledge platform, where they've invested a lot of money in getting a load of knowledge resources from all around the organization, and EY is obviously like professional services firms, so they're doing a lot of client work, very knowledge intensive, and they have they've basically created a kind of series of basically what are kind of like digital assistants, I guess, which are very specific kind of use cases that run over the content within this not within this knowledge platform, and there I think there's a couple of very sort of high profile ones. So there's one around creating, which really stood out for me, creating decks for proposals, which are basically kind of using AI to take all the original find the things, put them all together into a kind of like a deck that's kind of ready, and then download it. But and there's other cases where they got something which was quite mind-bending, where you can take a response for an AI response to an RFP, and it chugs through all the questions and then comes up with some resources for you. I think for me, what was interesting that, and it's also for this other winner that's coming out, is they've taken some very specific use cases where there are friction or pain or pain points which are kind of high value, and then applied AI very specifically to there. And that's where I think is quite interesting, where there's sort of opportunities for kind of value, I guess. But I'm sure you're going to find lots of sort of delightful examples, similar to the one that you kind of said. But AI, I guess, in terms of the capabilities within the products, as you kind of know, we're getting more and more kind of very sophisticated features. So I think we're going to get more AI usage within in terms of everyday kind of intranet management, and that kind of brings it a little back to kind of like the content governance, because I think AI does have real value in kind of supporting that kind of content governance. We've seen it doing doing heavy lifting on automatic tagging, for example, which is always an issue with kind of distributed content owners, or applying trying to spot out of date content, or scanning content to see if it meets kind of particular standards. And at the same time, I think it can be a little bit of a threat too, because we're seeing some quite mind-bending stuff where you can now start to create an intranet kind of almost out by pressing a few buttons. I think Unity Glass, or no, Unity Futures, isn't it, as an example of that. And that kind of worries me a little, in that it's sort of bypassing that important issue of considering the content that is is actually going to kind of be valuable, kind of has purpose, actually answers those anchored and unanchored tasks, has the kind of structure that's actually going to going to satisfy the AI, but also is going to satisfy the users. So bit of a long-winded thing. So I think there's some exciting things happening, but I can also see coming back to this idea of content governance, I think it's sort of it's a little bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. There's another question coming actually. So talking about content governance is quite a nice segue actually. So Chris, I will come back to you for this one. Someone sent in some questions about kind of knowledge management, the need for more people to be looking after content management as well. But the real question that stood out from the comment there for me is that they've asked, how do you look at creating a mandate of ownership of content within a large or global organisation? Have you got any tips to help this person, Chris?
I mean, that's sort of bread and butter of the orthodoxy. It's really hard. What are these sites for? What is the information for? What tasks do they provide? How is it important to the delivery of, let's say, that department or that manager's purpose? And why does it exist? I would be, if something doesn't have a good business case to be there, I would pitch it over to the group domain and let people kind of deal with it. If it is valuable, let's put it in the organizational domain. Let's make sure that we are crystal clear about how that is governed. We make sure that the only information that we put into the organizational domain is incredibly useful and important and valuable. And we put effectively some barriers of entry to make sure that that is the case. I think one of my great worries of this whole era is that people can have the feeling that governance itself can be automatic. And I think that's not the case. People who are publishing information within, a large organization don't necessarily see the big picture, but they have the ability with these tools to really, really mess stuff up. And reducing the number of reducing the amount that we publish, reducing the number of publishers that we need to deal with, making sure that they are absolutely clear through content strategy about what they are there to do and how they contribute value and what they shouldn't do. And they go off and do that in teams, for example, is one of the sort of the key things. So if you're struggling with defining that, I'd say don't worry about what the publishers are and how many you've got. Consider what the intranet is for, what sites are for, what is the best way to get value out of them in this published domain.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much. We're fast running out of time, so I think I will ask one more question of you and see if anything else just pops up while I'm asking it. So Steve, I will go back to you. If you could give the people who are listening today just one tip, what would it be?
Well, I suppose start working on this and start spreading the word about it, because I think there is definitely a kind of an awareness issue. That's kind of, I think that's a big ask, but I think it is it needs to be addressed. And I think we have the kind of core skills. If we're not going to look after it, I don't think anyone else will. Although it may, as more risks or more kind of like situations occur, it may be recognised as more of an issue than it is currently now.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And Chris, one last question for you then. There is so much out there right now about AI. There's so many conversations, there's so many different resources. What resources would you recommend to people to cut through some of this noise and also to give people some really practical advice about how they can move ahead, and particularly with governance and that sort of topic?
I will fly our own flag, but then I'll pass this one back to Steve. On our website, you'll see the intranet and digital workplace skills matrix. That's all been updated for the AI era. What are the skills that you need to form the roles that you need to be able to look after this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because there will be people who are beginning to own parts of this experience who are not from our comms IT background. They are from kind of legal and compliance. They don't know how to manage content. And there is a bunch of stuff there. We've also modeled different roles, different teams on that resource, and everything is now kind of interlinked. Steve, where else would you go for resources and practical advice?
I don't know if I'm going to get shouted down, but I think Microsoft actually does have some kind of useful resources. Not all of them, but there are some kind of practical things there. I think there's also, some people who are saying some important things. General, there's some very good people out there, like Sue Hanley, for example, and the I guess people like James Robertson and stuff like that, people like that. So there's also some quite good articles on that get published on Reworked. So I mean, that sounds a little bit like the usual suspects, but I think there is actually, when you look at the kind of detail, a lot of people do recognize that this is important, but sometimes getting practical advice, sometimes that's not always applicable to your own kind of organization. And a lot of this is actually, when we're talking about content governance, that's stuff that's been knocking around for ages. It's not necessarily, you can find more detail with AI, but actually that's that's just the bread and butter of what we've been doing for decades.
Absolutely. And of course, you've already mentioned it, but there are the Step 2 award winners. There's a lot of inspiration there as well. So I'm assuming we'll only see AI appearing more and more as the years go by. So it's definitely a resource worth downloading. And also to blow ClearBox's own trumpet as well, if you want to hear about the platforms that are on the market and what all of the vendors are up to. There's been some quite significant developments, I'd say, in the last couple of months. So it's again, the reviews that we do of their platforms are only going to get more interesting as we see more and more AI functionality introduced. So there's a couple more there. But I think that's it. We are out of time. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us and to those who have posed questions. Thank you very much to my guests, Steve and Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking about this quite complex topic. Hopefully lots of people are now thinking about governance and how they can improve their AI experiences with it. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Hope you can join us for the next one, where I will be joined by Kaz from Unily to talk about the concept of the internet as a digital workplace front door. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye now.
Thanks, Susie.
Thanks, Susie. Bye.